guys, just a quick thing before the episode starts. Um, Gabby was having some microphone issues while this recording is taking place. We still have yet to figure out the issue itself and to attempt to fix it. So you will hear her cutting her mic. Some stuff might not line up entirely. There will be some odd cuts. Um, between uh the background and stuff like that. um we had to stop recording a lot of the times to go back and um do the stuff again, because of Gabby's mic. And unfortunately, this is just what happens when you're trying to do a podcast from two different locations. The technical difficulties happen. But yeah, hope you enjoy the episode, and love you all. Podcast. I'm your host, Noah, and I'm joined by my co host, Gabby, the place where our rich pasts collide with pixels, controllers, and critical thinking. We explore history through a gamer's lens, diving into epic moments from world history and how they're influenced by the games we play today. From deep dive discussions on historical accuracy in popular titles to exploring forgotten gaming legends through interactive storytelling, this podcast is your map to cross the roads of history, gaming, and culture, featuring historical deep dives, game breakdowns, retrospective views, and smart commentary with a fantastically Canadian twist. Today, we're jumping into one of the most legendary franchises in gaming history, Halo. Whether you grew up playing it or only know it from the 2022 TV series, there is no denying the massive impact this universe had on the gaming industry and on pop culture as a whole. I've got our co host to help kick this off. Gabby, take us back to the beginning. How did this universe first come to be?
Absolutely, Noah. So let's definitely first begin with how Halo actually became to be because it really is kind of a wild way on how it all started. So before Master Chief ever even touched down on a Halo ring, the game wasn't even supposed to be an Xbox title. It actually started out as this small project from a studio called Bungie, who were a group of really passionate developers who were really working on the Mac back in the 90s. So, yeah, as crazy as it sounds, Halo was actually being originally made for Mac. The original idea for Halo wasn't even a first person shooter. It started as more of a real time strategy game, kind of like StarCraft or Command and Conquer. But as they built it out, Bungie realized that they had something incredibly special with the world. The sci fi settings, the vehicles, it all just became and felt really cool to be locked into that top down strategy style. So then that's whenever they shifted the gears and they turned it into more of a third person action shooter game. And then eventually into the first person shooter that we all know today. Now, here's where it actually becomes even more interesting. So, Microsoft saw what Bungie was working on and they were like, "Yeah, we want that. You know what? Scratch that. We need that." So, they were about to launch their first console, which was the original Xbox, but they needed that big game to show it off. So, Microsoft ended up buying Bungie in 2000 and Halo became an Xbox only exclusive. Behind the scenes, the developers were crazy tight. Bungie was rewriting, they were rebuilding levels, and polishing gameplay up until the last literal minute. But somehow, it came together perfectly. The world was building, the soundtrack, the mystery, the story of the Halo rings. It was a major hit. And then from there, Halo just exploded. We ended up getting sequels, novels, comics, shows. It turned into one of the best sci-fi universes in gaming. But at its core, it all came from this small team of devs who wanted to build a cool game, about space, aliens, and the hero in green armor saving. Now let's talk about what Halo is actually about because the lore actually is so deep. So the main character is named Master Chief, or John, also known as 017. He's a Spartan super soldier who's basically built to save humanity. He's serious, he's straight up unstoppable, and his mission is just to take down an alien alliance called Covenant. The Covenant's this mix of alien species who all follow a religion centered around those massive ring worlds called Halos. So they think that activating the Halos will, will send them onto the spiritual great journey, as they call it. But here's the catch. So those rings are actually super weapons made to wipe out all life in the galaxy. They were created by an ancient race called the Forerunners to stop this terrifying parasite called the Flood from spreading. So yeah, it's complicated, but it's awesome. And then through all of that war, the heart of the story is really about Master Chief and Cortana, which is his AI partner. So she is actually very smart. She's emotional. And then, the total opposite of him, but somehow they balance each other out so perfectly. And then after the first game blew up, Halo turned into this huge universe where each game began expanding the story. We got to see how the Spartans were created, what happened before the game, and how humanity fits into this giant intergalactic mess. For a lot of people, Halo was their first big gaming experience, especially like myself. Their introduction to all the storytelling in the game just truly feels cinematic. And even with all the ups and downs over the years, Halo still means something. It's about courage and holding it together when the whole galaxy's falling apart. So yeah, that's the story of Halo, where it all started, what it's about, and why it still matters. But I want to now dig even deeper into everything revolving around this map, so you can get a full understanding of the storyline. So the first thing I think I want to talk about would be the Spartan. Everyone knows Master Chief is a Spartan, but not everyone knows what that actually means. Spartans are genetically enhanced super soldiers, kind of like Captain America, if you will. Just that way, that kind of explains it a little bit better. They were faster, stronger, tougher than any normal human. But here's the wild part. They weren't originally made to fight aliens, as most people would think. The Spartan 2 program was originally designed by Dr. Catherine Halsey to stop human rebellions. So yeah, they were actually supposed to fight other humans. These kids were taken at a super young age. They were trained brutally and put through crazy augmentations. A lot of them didn't even survive the process. It's incredibly dark, but it also what makes Chief who he is. He was a weapon created by the government, but someone who still manages to hold on to humanity, unlike the rest. By the time that the Covenant showed up, the Spartans ended up becoming humanity's only real hope. And that's why Master Chief is so important, because he's literally the last of the original Spartan generation still standing. All right, so now that we understand that portion, now I can move on to the Flood, who is easily one of the creepiest parts of Halo. The Flood is a parasitic alien species that infects living beings and basically turns them into mindless monsters. But it's more than just space zombies, as I would put it. It's this ancient galaxy level threat that once wiped out almost everything. So that's actually why the Forerunners built the Halo rings in the first place. Not as weapons against each other, but as a last resort to literally starve the Flood. When activated, the rings kill off all of life, and then it just leaves the Flood with nothing to feed on. It was incredibly brutal, but it was very much effective. So when you really think about it, the whole Halo series is really just this constant cycle. Every civilization trying to survive, something bigger than themselves, and then deciding how far they're willing to go to do it. Are you following along with me so far?
Yeah, so basically, Halo started as this tiny max strategy game before Microsoft swooped in like a hungry winter moose, bought Bungie, and turned it into this legendary Xbox series we all grew up with, or rather, most of us grew up with. The story follows Master Chief, basically the Captain America of space, but with less maple syrup, a Spartan super soldier originally designed to stop human rebellions. He ends up fighting the Covenant, an alien alliance convinced the Halo rings will kick off their great journey, when really the rings are galaxy wiping super weapons built to stop the Flood, a parasitic nightmare, if that's what you want to call it, that basically is space zombies turned up to January in Winnipeg. Levels of scary. Um, Through all the chaos, the heart of the story is Chief and Cortana, the stoic soldier and the witty AI, the perfect duo, like Timbits and Double Doubles. Halo blew up into games, books, and shows, but at the end of the day, it's a franchise that still hits Canadians right in the nostalgia like a well aimed slap shot. So, with all that, who was your favorite character?
Um, I would have to say that Cortana would definitely have been my personal favorite in Halo just because she's so different from anything else that you would see in games. She's not just an AI, she's, not even just an AI sidekick who just tells her master what to do as, others would. She feels like a real character. She's got the personality, she's got the wit and the depth to her. What really fascinates me with how much it's just how much she grows over time. She starts as this brilliant, but also a very light, cheeky AI. But then you see her struggle with her own identity and basically becoming her own person. That kind of emotional depth in a character is so rare. And to me, it makes her way more compelling in my eyes than most humans in any game, which is why I adore her the most. But honestly, though, now that we're on the topic, of the subject of Cortana, she actually was created by Dr. Halsey's cloned brain, which basically means that she's got, human emotion. She's intelligent and very curious. But she's, still an artificial intelligence. She's quick, she's insanely smart, but also self-aware in a way that becomes very heartbreaking later on. Cortana and Master Chief have this bond, that's deeper than most human relationships. They depend on each other as she gives him purpose, he gives her trust. But then over time, she starts to deteriorate, because AIs in the Halo universe only last about 7 years before they start breaking down, as they call it. So when that happens, they start thinking too fast. They start feeling too much, basically spiraling out of control. So seeing that happen to Cortana is what gives Halo 4 and 5 so much emotional weight. In my eyes, it's not just about saving the galaxy, it's about someone who's been there since the beginning. So yeah, Halo might look like just another sci-fi shooter on the surface, but underneath it's packed with all these layers about control, sacrifice, identity, and what it means to even be human. The Spartans represent power and control, the Flood and Foreigners represent destruction, and then Cortana, she represents the line between machine and humanity. That's what's kept people invested for over 20 years with Halo. It's not just about the gameplay, it's about the whole story. It's about the characters and, the game that feels so much bigger than what you see on screen.
So, after hearing you talk about them a bunch, I'm wondering, probably the viewers and listeners as well, who exactly are the Forerunners? What are they?
Yeah, so the Forerunners were actually the super advanced alien race that existed hundreds of thousands of years before humans. So they were basically the galaxy's caretakers, the ones responsible for maintaining balance and preserving life. But like most powerful civilizations, they kind of just like let it go to their heads. They believe that they were chosen by these godlike beings called the precursors to protect the galaxy. The problem is, though, is that the belief started to twist over time. When the Forerunners realized that the precursors might have chosen humans instead, they didn't exactly take that too well. That jealousy led to a full-blown war between them, and the Forerunners, ended up wiping out most of the precursors. But the plot twist, though, is that the precursors weren't completely gone. Some of the remains eventually mutated into what we now know as the Flood, so they are basically the result of that ancient betrayal. Once the Forerunners realized that they couldn't stop the Flood, however, they had to make a choice to either lose the entire galaxy or use something that could stop the infection for good. So that's when they built the Halo arrays, or, the Halo rings, which is what we call them, and they're this massive ring-world super weapon. When fired, they wipe out all sentient life in the entire galaxy, and anything that the Flood could use as a host. It's the ultimate nuke everything and start over plan. As many would think opposite, they didn't build the Halo rings because they wanted power or some cosmic weapon. They built them because of one thing, which was the Flood. They were super smart. They learned quick. Every person that it affected made it so much stronger than before. And no matter what the Forerunners tried, nothing worked. The Flood was just outpacing them at every turn. So eventually the Forerunners realized that the nightmare scenario was happening, which was, as long as an intelligent life existed, the Flood would always have something to infect. So the rings became the very last option. Therefore, it wasn't a power move or revenge. It was just a desperate, heartbreaking decision to stop everything from being permanently wiped out by the Flood. So yeah, then they ended up actually pulling the trigger.
And then once the rings went off, the galaxy just went quiet. The Forerunners had already prepared for this, though. So they ended up saving DNA and species, including early humans on the Ark, that they had built in other hidden facilities. That way life could restart once the flood was gone. The Ark being their Halo ring control factory in space type of thing, almost kind of like a remote control.
But the Forerunners themselves, what happened to them? How did a whole advanced civilization end overnight? Or did they leave only a few who stayed behind while the rest just faded away so they could restart the galaxy?
Yeah, so most didn't survive. Some stayed behind, some faded out, as their civilization basically ended overnight. They didn't necessarily choose to die, but they knew it was about sacrifice and their duty as the galaxy caretakers, even if it meant the end of their own kind. So the Forerunners that stayed behind on the Ark, however, had a major task. Slowly the Forerunners on the Ark started reseeding life again. They healed plants, animals started returning, humans were eventually reintroduced, restarting fresh with zero memory of any of that ancient alien drama. And then for thousands of years, the Halo rings just sat out there like a giant forgotten artifact, waiting for someone just to find them again. And then you want to fast forward way into the future, humans crawl back up that tech ladder, as they start exploring space again. And then they eventually bump into the Covenant, a bunch of alien species all united under this big religious belief system. So then they start thinking, that activating the Halo rings will send them on some holy journey. They, however, have no idea that it will actually kill everything. That's the big misunderstanding the whole early series is built on. Did that answer your question?
Yes, that did, but what you're telling me is that the Covenant basically went on this holy crusade to fire up the Halo rings without even knowing they were super weapons, and that's pretty much the whole backbone of the game's lore?
Um, Actually, yes and no. By the time you reach the newer games, the story ends up shifting. All species finally understand what the halos really do. So it's no longer about firing them anymore, but now it's just about obtaining them and controlling them. The banished, rogue AIs, leftover Forerunner tech. Everybody wants what comes with owning a halo, but not actually setting it off. Because the threat alone is what gives you the power. The only character who ever actually really leaned toward using the rings again was Cortana. But even she didn't want to fire them like before. She just wanted to use the threat of firing the Halo to force everyone to obey her using her peace through control plan. So now when you look at Halo as a whole, it's not just humans versus aliens or some, cool sci-fi shooter story of the galaxy still living in the decision of the Forerunners that they made to stop the flood. The rings, the Ark, the Covenant, the Banished, everything ties back to that moment. And now it's just up to Master Chief to keep broken history from repeating itself. So now that we have the full understanding of everything, do you have any other questions for me?
I actually do. So you mentioned, um, you know, Cortana's peace through control plan and whatnot. Where is she now
Yeah.
with Master Chief? Knowing that she could possibly take over the universe.
Yeah. So before we actually need to know what happens with Iron Chief, you'll probably have to know the background more so of what the peace through control plan was. So basically Cortana hits like this point where she thinks the only way to is to end up she's falling apart. Well, actually she's more so dying, but then the domain suddenly stabilizes her and then she becomes this out of feeling more powerful than ever. So really quick, the domain is actually the Forerunners network. It's just full of their knowledge and their so she uses that and then she decides, you know what? Now no more war. Everyone's gonna listen to me now. And she honestly believes she's forcing peace, not being a villain. So then Chief, he ends up being heartbroken. This is his partner, the one person he trusts. And now she's out here taking over planets with giant guardians. He doesn't want to fight her. He just wants her back. But he knows that he can't let her run the whole galaxy, no matter how much he cares about her, and will take her down if it's necessary. So their conflict, ends up being this really emotional split. Cortana thinks she's controlled, everyone, but that it's going to save them. And then Chief thinks that saving her might end up needing to be him stopping her. So that's kind of like the whole thought process of Cortana with that control plan. And basically Master Chief trying to show her, this is not you. You know what I mean? So that's kind of like the whole part of that.
Yeah, no, I get that, and I mean, I feel bad for the guy, honestly.
Right.
You don't want to have to be in that position where you're forced to stop somebody that you care about.
Exactly.
Um, Chief's childhood. Does he remember any of it?
Um, so in the actual Halo games, Chief does remember pieces of his childhood, just not a ton of um the Spartan program didn't wipe his memories or anything like that. It was just more of like the training and all the trauma kind of pushed that stuff way into the background. He does have like little flashes, just like normal, but it's just like all kind of fuzzy, like remembering an old game. I'm sure that you've probably had that. Um, However, the show on Paramount, they changed it. They basically made him forget everything so that they could build this storyline around him rediscovering past and whatnot. But in the game, he's not totally blank as to how it is in the show, which is crazy to me. Um, he remembers some things. It's just blurred and under the years of being turned into this universe's biggest soldier, which is one of my biggest pet peeves with the show. Like I know that they do it for cinematic reasons, but it's not the same as the game.
Okay, so uh, obviously, one could assume that Halo is one of your favorite games, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so what hooked you into the series? What made it your favorite game?
Um Honestly, the moment that I would say hooked me into wasn't like specifically a cutscene or a mission or anything. It was just realizing how deep the storyline actually goes. Like you jump in expecting like a super cool game and all, but then suddenly you're like game, of all these layers of the story and everything just unfolding. Um, it's the kind of story that you don't really see in games. So most games give you like oh, there's a bad guy, shoot the bad guy, save the world, the end. But then Halo, gives you a whole history. So like you're stepping into the middle of something like way bigger than you. Every ring, every character, they all have a purpose and a backstory that actually matters. So that's what made me fall in love with it. The gameplay is fun, absolutely. But the game is what kept me going. It's rare to find a game where you can have legit conversations about the background of it and the reasons for like the continuance of the games, the shows, comics, everything that I named before. But when I realized that Halo wasn't just a shooter, it was a whole storyline that nothing else really compared to. That series alone is what tied me into gaming in the first place, and this is where I truly fell in love with.
Okay, uh, I mean, you obviously have a deep-seated history with the game.
Yes. I've
Yeah,
been playing Halo since I was a kid.
yeah.
Love it.
I've only ever played, I don't know, one or two times at my friend's house because growing up I've only had a PlayStation. I've never had an Xbox, and
Right.
unfortunately, Halo was only available on the Xbox because it was owned by Microsoft. You know. Um, Speaking of Microsoft, you brought up that they acquired Bungie, but Bungie was doing stuff on Mac already. Was
Yeah.
Bungie owned by Apple, or were they just using the Mac?
Oh, no, 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 no. So Bungie's always been independent, except for a period whenever Microsoft owned them for Halo exclusively. They literally only bought them out for Halo, and then they ended up gaining back their independence. So Apple actually had nothing to do with them. So in 2007, they actually broke from them from after, and then they started, making their own things, making their own games. Like Bungie's actually the maker of Destiny. And it's a really big game right now.
Hmm.
They're kind of just doing their own thing right now.
I didn't know that they were the creator of Destiny. To be
Yeah.
honest with you, that's actually kind of surprising. I
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
I
something interesting.
actually So I love Halo. I know everything about Halo. I did not know originally how it was made from like Bungie and Microsoft and all that. So I actually learned that with the process of learning about all.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. That makes sense. Um, if you, um, were to be there and to help create the game, what
Oh
would you
Lord.
change?
Oh Lord. Um, I feel like I wouldn't change anything per se. I feel like I would want to put in more of the storyline of him being taken as a child and like the whole process of what happened there. I know that they're technically cloned and whatnot, but I would have just liked to see more of the backstory of Chief versus just saying, oh, he was taken as a child, he was, brutally trained, and you know what I mean? I would want more of a background.
Yeah, no,
And I feel like that would have been something that they could have put in there.
no, I get that. I get that. Would you have you know, changed Chief on how he acts, or would you
Absolutely
keep him
not.
the same?
Nope. Absolutely not. I would keep him the same. The reason why I would is just because of the storyline and supposed to be like Captain America, where he's a super soldier. He's supposed to be a badass. And he's meant to be that almost like he has a robotic sense to him in a way. Like he's just so, emotionally stable that he doesn't have to think about emotions. He focuses on the mission, he gets that mission. I fully believe that he should stay the same. And I do love also the fact of them adding Cortana in there also brings out some of his humanity side. You know what I mean? Because it kind of like has it to where you can almost be a part of it.
Mhm. Mhm. Would you agree that Chief and Cortana are vital to how the series developed?
Yes, 100%. I think that they very much in the entire series learned off of each. He started learning how to be human, in a way of, she, basically has him questioning throughout the entire thing of, am I looking at things correctly? Am I doing things? She just has me, second guessing in a way that no one else, because you have to think that the government wants him to be an emotional or emotionless, let me rephrase that, emotionless super soldier.
Mhm.
He's never had those people telling him, well, is this really what you want? Are you sure that you don't want to do the mission this way? And
Mhm.
then it starts bringing out something in him, and then vice versa. You know what I mean? Cortana has to rely on someone in order to survive, but
Mhm.
having that friendship there is what really develops her into finding her own, humanity as well as her own feelings and the way that she goes about handling situations. There would not be that peace through control plan if he didn't also help develop her into the AI that she ends up becoming.
Mhm. What obviously you've talked a lot about Halo as a whole, but you
Yes.
still have yet to answer one vital question.
Okay.
What what um which Halo is your favorite?
Oh my lord, I thought you never asked. Okay, so I actually have two personal favorites.
Okay.
My favorites would either be Halo Reach or Halo Infinite. So Halo Reach and Halo Infinite are actually, I know that the first games, you know what I mean, but
Mhm.
they're the first ones that I physically had and what made me fall in love with it because I had an Xbox 360, was my very first console, and having, the my dad say, "Hey, I have Halo, try it out and see if you're gonna like it."
Mhm.
And I'm not into sci-fi games, at least not usually. But then playing that for the first time, I was like, "Oh my gosh," just the whole I love the cutscenes, I love the story, and then it just made me want to fully, go more into it. So now, if you want me to be completely honest, those are probably the only 2 Halo games I could probably play with my just because I played it continuously.
That's a very bold statement, Gabby.
I'm not joking. I swear to God, I downloaded the game And I even had a friend of ours that were over playing the game, and I told him word for word on what he needed to happen. I am not kidding. I could do it with my eyes closed.
I I get that feeling from other games that I play too. Now, would you say that you prefer the game more than the TV show?
Um, yes, I would, only because, like I said, I feel like the storylines on original series on anything, whether book, movie, or the game before the movie or show, I think that there's a lot more to it whenever it's the original.
Hmm.
And but the thing though is that I can also see where some people would also like the TV show. Granted, I just literally got done streaming before this and explained this in my stream. I love the Halo series. I don't like some of the changes that they made. Mainly Master Chief's beginning. His upbringing, on them trying to have it where he doesn't remember a single thing. And then it makes no sense how legitimately out of nowhere in this.
Hmm.
I know it's for cinematics. I know it's just because it's a movie or a show. A show. However, I don't like that. There's a new character in there that he has to be connected to, and that they're both a part of the Halo. I'm not really a big fan on that either. I really wish some of it they would have stuck to. However, they stuck to the rings, they stuck to the domain, they stuck to the covenant and the banished and the road, all of that.
Hmm.
So I don't know. I mean, I'm in the middle, but mostly I
Okay. Okay. Now, last question before we got to wrap this up. With
okay.
the new Halo game coming out, more or less,
Oh.
the remastered version, um, are you excited for it, and will you play it?
I am very excited. So there was a game, I believe it was the early 2000s. It was either 2000 or 2001 where Halo Combat Evolved came out.
Hmm.
And I know that they're creating the new one. Is it this year or next year?
I think it's next year. I think it's
I think it's next
2026.
year as well. They're basically just remaking it of the Combat Evolved. So I mean, I'm kind of freaking excited for it, and I'm probably gonna be one of the people to fight ahead of time.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm kind of excited to see the new versions. I mean, I know that, but watching also how I stated before, watching the series, watching Chief, evolve throughout the series, I think it's kind of fun. The game, with newer tech.
Hmm.
So I'm kind of excited for it. I ain't gonna lie.
Fantastic. Honestly, fantastic. We've reached the end of the screen today. For today's retro rewind. Um, don't worry, there are plenty more missions in the queue. But for now, let's holster our weapons, save our progress, and wrap up the episode. Thanks for tuning in and geeking out with us as we jump feet first into the Halo universe.
If you guys have enjoyed today's episode, please make sure to follow, subscribe, and leave a comment. It helps us reach more gamers across the galaxy. And if you want exclusive and unedited content straight from our dropship, please make sure to check out our Patreon. You got a game that you want us to explore or a guest you'd love to hear us squad up with? Drop a comment or send us an email. We'd love to hear.
Until next time, Spartans, stay curious, keep playing, and never stop hitting that start button. Transmission ending. Game over for now.
In the land of the maple, where the stories unfold. Podcast vibes, every word, pure gold. Laughter and knowledge, we share every week. That Canadian podcast, it's the truth that we speak. Tune in with the crew, hear the beat drop. Voices voices of the North, we just can't stop. That Canadian podcast, come take a ride. Voices united, we're filled with pride. Stories and laughter, let's share our way. From coast to coast, this is our play.